The birthday party was going exactly as I'd expected. Which is to say, terribly. Grandpa Frank's 80th birthday celebration at the Riverside Country Club had turned into another showcase for everyone's achievements except mine. My cousin Elena was bragging about her law firm partnership. My brother Carlos was showing off photos of his new Aspen vacation home. My sister Isabella was discussing her upcoming art gallery opening. Me. I sat quietly at the far end of the table, picking at my salmon and trying to become invisible. "So Mia," Uncle Roberto said with that patronizing smile I'd grown to hate, "are you still doing that computer thing?" "I work in tech, yes." "Still trying to make those little apps?" Aunt Carmen laughed. "How adorable. When are you going to get a real job like your siblings?" I glanced at Grandpa Frank, the only person at this table who had ever shown genuine interest in my work. He winked at me, but even his support couldn't shield me from what was coming. Dad cleared his throat, preparing for one of his speeches. "Since we're all here celebrating family, I think it's time we address the elephant in the room." "Oh no. Mia," he continued, his voice carrying across the private dining room, "you're 32 years old. You're poor and embarrassing our family with this startup nonsense. It's time to stop playing games and get a real job." The room fell silent. Every family member was staring at me, waiting for my response to Dad's public humiliation. "Dad, please. It's Grandpa's birthday. Can we not do this here? When else are we going to do it? Look at your siblings. They have careers, houses, respect in the community. What do you have?" I looked around the table at my successful family members, all nodding in agreement. They saw a woman in a simple black dress, driving a 5-year-old Honda Civic, living in what they assumed was a tiny apartment. They had no idea that the computer thing I'd been working on was actually Quantum Solutions, an AI and data analytics company I'd built into one of the fastest-growing tech firms in the country. They had no idea that my little apps were enterprise software solutions used by Fortune 500 companies. They had no idea that their poor and embarrassing family member was worth $1.3 billion. "Answer me, Mia," Dad demanded. "What do you have to show for your life?" I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could speak, the large-screen TV on the dining room wall suddenly switched from sports highlights to a breaking news alert. "We interrupt this program for breaking news," the anchor announced. "Forbes magazine has just released its annual billionaire list, and for the first time, a local tech entrepreneur has made the exclusive ranking." Every head in the room turned toward the TV screen. The anchor continued, but I could barely hear her over my heart pounding. 29-year-old Mia Martinez, founder and CEO of Quantum Solutions, has been named to the Forbes billionaire list with an estimated net worth of $1.3 billion, making her the youngest self-made female billionaire in the tech sector. The photo that appeared on screen was my official corporate headshot. Me in a navy business suit, looking confident and professional. Nothing like the simple black dress I was wearing tonight, but unmistakably me. The silence in our private dining room was absolute. The AI and data analytics company, which Martinez founded in her college dorm room just 4 years ago, has revolutionized how major corporations analyze their data. Quantum Solutions algorithms are now used by over 200 Fortune 500 companies, generating annual revenues exceeding $400 million. I watched my family's faces as they processed this information. Dad's mouth was hanging open. Mom looked like she might faint. Carlos was staring at the TV like it might be showing a different Mia Martinez. Martinez reportedly turned down acquisition offers exceeding $800 million last year, choosing instead to take her company public in what became the most successful tech IPO of the decade. The camera cut to footage of me ringing the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange 6 months ago. Then my face on business magazine covers, clips from interviews with major media outlets. Interviews my family had apparently never seen. "Holy shit," Elena whispered, then immediately looked apologetically at Grandpa Frank. Finally, the anchor concluded, "Martinez was unavailable for comment today, but in a recent Fortune interview she credited her success to believing in your vision even when others don't understand it." The full Forbes billionaire list will be published Monday. The TV returned to regular programming, leaving my family in stunned silence. "That's..." Isabella's voice came out as a croak. "That's really you. It's really me. But you said you worked in tech. You never said you owned a billion-dollar company." Mom's voice was shrill with panic. You never asked for details. You all just assumed I was failing because that fit your narrative. Dad stared at me like he'd never seen me before. Mia, this is impossible. If you're really worth billion. With AB, Carlos said faintly. If that's true, then why do you live like you're broke? Why drive that old car? Like what, Dad? Like someone who doesn't need to prove her worth through material possessions. Uncle Roberto found his voice first. Mia, sweetheart, we had no idea. Why didn't you tell us? When would I have told you? During family dinners where you treat me like the family disappointment? During phone calls where you offer advice about being more realistic? We were just trying to help. Help? By constantly telling me I was wasting my time? By assuming I was poor without ever asking about my actual situation? By treating me like a charity case? The questions came faster now as my family tried to process this revelation. How long have you been successful? Mom asked. The company went public 18 months ago. We've been profitable for 3 years. I became a millionaire at 28. And you never thought to mention this? Dad's voice mixed hurt and anger. Dad, 6 months ago at Easter, you told me I was living in a fantasy world and needed to wake up and join the real world. Why would I share my success with people who clearly didn't believe I was capable of achieving it? Grandpa Frank, who had been quiet throughout this exchange, suddenly started laughing. Not a polite chuckle but a deep, delighted belly laugh. Grandpa. Isabella looked concerned. Are you okay? I'm better than okay, he said, wiping tears from his eyes. I'm proud. So incredibly proud of my granddaughter. You knew? Mom asked. Of course I knew. Mia's been telling me about her company for years. I've been following her progress, reading about her success. He turned to me with a huge grin. I have every article about quantum solutions pinned to my bulletin board. Why didn't you tell us? Dad demanded. Because it wasn't my story to tell. And frankly, I wanted to see how long it would take you to figure out that you were treating a billionaire like a failure. He shook his head. 4 years. 4 years of her being wildly successful before you accidentally found out on television. The weight of his words settled over the table. 4 years of dismissing my work. 4 years of treating me like the family disappointment while I was building an empire. Mia, Elena said carefully, when you said you worked in tech, we thought you meant some entry-level startup job. I do work at a startup. I founded it. I run it. I built it from a dorm room idea into a company that employs over 1,200 people and generates nearly $500 million annually. $500 million? Carlos's voice cracked. $437 million last fiscal year, to be precise. More silence as they processed this number. I have questions, Isabella said finally. I'm sure you do. The apartment you live in, is it actually tiny? I live in a penthouse downtown. 42nd floor, 4,000 square feet. And your car? I have several cars. I drive the Honda because it's reliable and I don't need to impress anyone. I also have a Tesla and a vintage Porsche. Mom looked like she might cry. Mia, why didn't you correct us when we made assumptions? Because I wanted to see if you'd love and support me when you thought I had nothing. I wanted to know if your affection was conditional on my success. And what did you learn? Dad asked quietly. I learned that you're more comfortable with me being a failure than being successful. I learned that you'd rather offer pity than ask questions and show genuine interest. I learned that your love came with conditions. Mia, Uncle Roberto said, we owe you an apology. A huge apology. You owe me more than an apology. You owe me respect. You owe me the courtesy of asking about my life instead of making assumptions. You're right, Mom said, tears flowing. We've been terrible. We treated you like you were incapable of success. Dad stared at his hands. I called you poor and embarrassing. You did. In front of the whole family. You did. While you're actually worth more than all of us combined. Significantly more, yes. He looked up, his face filled with shame. Mia, I don't know how to apologize for that. Start by seeing me as I actually am instead of as you think I should be. How do we do that? Ask me about my work. Not to offer advice but because you're genuinely interested. Ask about my goals, challenges, successes. Treat me like the successful CEO I am. We can do that, Isabella said immediately. I want to hear about your company, Carlos added. I want to understand what you've built. For the next hour, my family peppered me with real questions about quantum solutions. They wanted to understand my technology, business model, growth strategy. They asked about my employees' corporate culture expansion plans. It was the first time in years that I felt like they were genuinely interested in my life. The office building we saw on TV, Mom said, is that where you work every day? Most days, yes. Though I travel frequently for client meetings and investor presentations. And you really have 1,200 employees? As of last month. We're growing by about 75 people per quarter. Dad shook his head in amazement. How did we get this so wrong? Because you never asked and I stopped trying to tell you. Every time I mention my work, you'd dismiss it or offer advice about doing something else. It was easier to let you believe what you wanted. But the media coverage, Elena pointed out. You've been on magazine covers. How did we miss that? Did you look for it? Did you Google my name? Did you read tech publications? The uncomfortable silence was my answer. We assumed, Mom said quietly, that if you were really successful you would have told us. I tried to tell you. For years. But every conversation about my work turned into a lecture about being practical. Eventually I gave up. Grandpa Frank took my hand. I'm sorry they didn't listen, sweetheart. But I've been proud of you every single day. I know, Grandpa. You're the only one who ever asked about my work without trying to change the subject. Dad cleared his throat. Mia, what happens now? How do we rebuild after all this? That depends on you. Can you treat me with the respect you'd show any other billionaire CEO? Can you show genuine interest in my life? Can you stop offering unsolicited advice? Yes, Mom said immediately. We can do all of that. Can you accept that I don't need your guidance about my financial future? Yes. Can you see me as a successful businesswoman instead of your little girl who needs protection? We can try, Dad said. It might take adjustment, but we can try. I nodded slowly. Then we can try to rebuild. But it has to be based on who I actually am. Agreed, Isabella said. Completely agreed. As we prepared to leave, Dad pulled me aside. Mia, I need you to know how sorry I am. Not just for tonight, but for years of not seeing who you really were. I appreciate that, Dad. When I said you were poor and embarrassing, how did that feel, knowing what you actually have? It felt like you were describing a stranger. The person you were talking about, poor, embarrassing, unsuccessful. That's not who I am. That's who you needed me to be to feel better about yourselves. He winced. That's harsh. But it's true. It's easier to be the successful parent of a struggling daughter than the moderately successful parent of a billionaire daughter. As I drove home in my embarrassing Honda Civic, I reflected on the evening's revelations. In one moment everything had changed. A news broadcast had completely upended years of family dynamics. My phone buzzed with texts. Grandpa Frank, so proud of my billionaire granddaughter. Can't wait to brag at the senior center tomorrow. Carlos, could we have coffee? I want to hear more about your company and apologize properly. Isabella, I'm ashamed of how we've acted. You're an inspiration. Can we start over? Mom, I love you, Mia. I'm sorry it took a TV announcement for us to realize what an amazing daughter we have. Dad, you'll never be poor and embarrassing to this family again. You're brilliant and successful, and I should have seen that from the beginning. As I pulled into my penthouse parking garage, I felt lighter than I had in years. The secret was out. The pretending was over. My family finally knew who I really was. More importantly, they finally respected who I really was. It had taken a Forbes billionaire announcement and live TV to get their attention, but sometimes the most important conversations happen in the most unexpected ways. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities. But tonight, for the first time in years, I felt like I was truly part of the Martinez family. Not as the disappointment they needed to fix, but as the success story they could finally celebrate. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor gave me time to think about Grandpa Frank's birthday party. It hadn't gone as anyone expected, but it had accomplished something more important than celebration. It had finally brought my family together. All of us, including the billionaire they never knew they had.